He was just a loud, funny caveman on TV. Or at least, that's what we thought as kids. But behind every yabba dabba doo, Fred Flintstone is quietly terrified of being forgotten.
Flintstones, meet the Flintstones.
Trapped in a Stone Age world that feels strangely scripted, haunted by invisible laughter he can't control. His anger, his bragging, the way he slams his fist on the table over and over, they're not just gags. They're emotional patterns that look uncomfortably familiar once you've grown up. When you really pay attention, Bedrock stops being a silly prehistoric town and starts feeling like a mirror of our own lives. These are 14 weird facts about the Flintstones, 1960, that you never noticed as a child. And we're about to break them down one by one. So don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let's jump straight into part 1. The shout, yabba dabba doo, and the fear of being forgotten.
Flintstones, meet the Flintstones.
Every time Fred shouts yabba dabba doo, he looks like a carefree, loud, funny caveman. But deep inside, he always feels that if he isn't loud enough, ridiculous enough, all of Bedrock will forget Fred Flintstone ever existed. His hand slams onto the stone steering wheel again, tiny chips of rock flying off like part of a familiar ritual. Every hit is a desperate statement. I'm still here. Fred doesn't dare stay quiet too long, afraid that the canned laughter somewhere above will fade out, and his family will vanish from a screen he himself will never actually see. Part 2. Feeling filmed in the middle of Bedrock. No one tells Fred he's living inside a cartoon, but his body can feel it. Sometimes, as he steps out of his house, feet crunching over stone, he pauses for half a second and looks up, as if he senses someone watching from above. Whenever he repeats the same silly line, the same grimace, the same fist slam on the table, the invisible laughter plays again. That pattern repeats so often that Fred starts to wonder, why do my mistakes play over and over like this? But instead of changing, he keeps doing the exact same things, like some unseen script is forcing him to hit every mark perfectly. Part 3. Stone Age technology and the distortion of time. Fred lives in a world of stone, bones, and dinosaurs, yet uses a recorder that's a bird, a vacuum that's a pet, a dishwasher that's a sighing prehistoric creature. He often taps them gently, then harder, repeating the "if it's broken, hit it" logic, even though he knows they can feel it. In his mind, a strange question is always lurking. They say this is the past, so why does everything feel like a parody of the future? Still, whenever he thinks too deeply, Fred cuts himself off by yelling at someone or slamming his hand on the table, as if running away from the idea that time itself is being bent around him by someone else. Part 4. Barney, the gentle mirror of Fred's anger. Barney laughs a lot, talks little, and always looks at Fred with more sympathy than judgment. That's exactly why, unconsciously, Fred constantly dumps his anger on his best friend. He drops into his usual mode, deep, growling voice, arms crossed, heavy stomps on the stone floor. The familiar trio of negative behaviors he uses whenever he wants to prove he's above someone. Yet Barney rarely fights back. That kindness makes Fred uncomfortable, as if Barney is reflecting the flaws he doesn't want to face. Every argument ends with Fred silently blaming himself, only for him to repeat the same pattern next time. It's an emotional loop neither of them names, but both quietly accept. Part 5. Wilma and the apologies that never say enough. Fred knows exactly what he's doing every time he comes home late, misses dinner, or forgets a simple promise to Wilma. He walks into the house with that all-too-familiar gait, tries to force a smile, then quickly throws up his defenses. Excuses, raised voice, flailing arms. Wilma doesn't need to scream. She just folds her arms, tilts her head, her eyes tired, yet still holding some affection. That silent wall hits Fred deeper than any scolding would. At night, when the house is quiet, he lies there replaying the scene of himself, pounding the dinner table, his voice louder than necessary. He swears he'll do better next time. But when the pressure at the quarry returns, he uses the same old combo on Wilma, almost as if he himself doesn't believe he can ever become a gentler man. Part 6. The Quarry, where Fred becomes the rock that yells. At the quarry, Fred is not the main character of anything. He's just another worker in the crowd, getting yelled at by the boss, doing the same tasks so many times that today and yesterday blur together. Every time he's forced to work overtime or gets scolded unfairly, his first reflex is to bow his head and take it. The second reflex is to keep score in his heart. At night, he pays it all back by shouting, slamming, stomping in front of people who didn't cause any of it. Wilma, Barney, Dino. That habit of venting in the wrong direction becomes a repeating pattern, giving Fred momentary relief while layering another sheet of guilt over his chest. Part 7. Dino. The witness to Fred's weakest moments. Dino is one of the few beings in Fred's life who doesn't laugh, doesn't judge, and doesn't require him to be funny. Every time Fred pushes Dino away, swatting at that purple head, rubbing against him, it's usually because he's afraid of being hugged, afraid of comfort, afraid someone might see through the angry shell he's built. Yet on sleepless nights, Fred lets Dino lie beside him, his hand subconsciously stroking Dino's back, the rhythm steadier than his own breathing. That rare, gentle act never appears in front of the invisible audience, never comes with canned laughter. It belongs only to the two of them, a tired man worn out from being loud all the time, and a dino dog who understands more than it can show. Part 8. The Stone House, Home or Inescapable Stage. From the outside, the Flintstone house looks like a solid shelter. But to Fred, every stone wall sometimes feels like a backdrop. He walks in, slams the door, and continues playing the roles: hot-headed husband, loud father, bragging neighbor. When he's angry, he throws things, slams the table, stomps the floor. Actions repeated with eerie precision, as if someone is waiting for that exact moment to hit the laugh track. When the anger passes, he curls up on the stone chair, feeling the house grow larger, emptier. Fred isn't sure whether he's living in a home or on a set. All he knows is that whenever a real feeling tries to surface, he unconsciously replaces it with a joke line or an over-the-top gesture. Part 9. The Invisible Laughter. Fred can't control. Fred can't see his audience, but he hears their laughter, coming at the strangest times: when he trips, when he says something dumb, when Wilma scolds him, when he fights with Barney. Those sounds don't belong to anyone in the room, yet they somehow define how he feels about himself. Over time, Fred learns that the harder he slams his hand down, the louder he yells, the more ridiculous his mistakes, the thicker the laughter becomes. Part of him sees it as proof he has value. Another part quietly fears that if he ever becomes calm, kind, and stops causing trouble, no one will laugh when they see him anymore. Part 10. Pebbles and the Fear of Repeating the Same Circle. Holding Pebbles in his arms and looking into her round eyes, Fred feels the weight of everything he's repeating. Every shout, every table slam, every argument followed by reconciliation. All of it is etching itself into a child's memory, just as it once carved itself into his. He remembers himself as a kid, hiding behind the adults, hearing the shouting and things slamming, and learning that anger is the strongest language. Now, he's on the other side, acting out the same old play. Each time he hugs Pebbles, he silently promises to be different. But when the boss yells, the car jams, or Barney does something that annoys him, he unconsciously chooses the old solution. Yelling, slamming his hand down, and then watching her sleep at night, afraid he's carving the same crack into a brand new childhood. Part 11. The Stone Car and the Illusion of Controlling Life. Fred's car looks impressive, but whether it moves or not depends entirely on his legs. He often brags to Barney about his amazing driving skills, but whenever the car gets stuck, his reflex is always the same. Slam the steering wheel, shout, blame everything except himself. Every slam on the steering wheel is a familiar callback. He slams the dinner table, slams chairs, slams anything within reach when he feels powerless. He believes that if he hits hard enough and yells loud enough, he'll regain control. Yet just like the stone car is limited by the path already laid down, Fred's life is limited by the structure of a sitcom. He thinks he's driving, but most of the time, he's just running along a script he can't see and can't stop. Part 12. The Quiet Episodes in Fred's Mind. In rare, peaceful moments, Fred imagines very different days. He comes home on time, doesn't yell, listens to Wilma talk, plays with Pebbles on the stone floor, drinks less, and talks more with Barney. Those are episodes, with no canned laughter, no pratfalls, no over-the-top outbursts. Just small, ordinary, even boring lines. But it's that boring feeling that makes him feel strangely at ease. The problem is, every morning he still wakes up in the old world, wearing the same character skin, expected to do something silly so someone out there can laugh. And so, the beautiful episodes in his head are always shortened, always cut, before they can ever air. Part 13. The Obsession with Being Remembered After the Screen Goes Dark. In his quiet moments, Fred sometimes asks himself, when people turn this off, when the laughter stops, does anyone still think about me? That question is never spoken out loud, but it shows up in his eyes whenever he sits alone on the front step. His fear of being forgotten drives him to push harder, even through negative behavior. He talks louder than needed, brags more than he feels, acts more important than he believes he is. Every slam of his hand on the table is like adding another exclamation mark to his own name, hoping someone will remember it a little longer. He doesn't know that for many people, that name has already become part of their childhood. All he knows is that he has to keep being loud, just in case the moment he softens, the stone world around him goes silent too. Part 14. The Strangest Truth. Fred has no idea. He's an icon. Strangest of all, Fred Flintstone has absolutely no idea he stepped out of bedrock long ago. He doesn't know he lives in the memories of generations, doesn't know that invisible laughter comes from kids in another era, doesn't know that later, when they grow up, many will look back and see a blown-up version of themselves in him. Fred only sees a man who's a bit rough, hot-headed, clumsy, constantly repeating the same pattern, shouting, slamming, bragging, then regretting. He never realizes that this imperfection is exactly what makes him unforgettable. If he could ever stop performing and look inward, maybe he'd understand. Behind those simple drawing lines is a tangled soul. And that's why The Flintstones, 1960, isn't just a story about a prehistoric family, but a strange mirror reflecting the emotional patterns we still unconsciously repeat To this very day,